Body floating by the docks? No, still alive. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is The Advocate, and today I'm an advocate for Before They Are Hanged, a book review. I'm out here trudging my way through the Great Plains, and I thought, hey, what not better time than now than to continue delving into Joe Abercrombie's grimdark baby, better known as the First Law series. Before They Are Hanged, the sequel to The Blade itself, is the second book in the First Law series. It also marks the second book ever written by Joe Abercrombie himself. It was released on March 15, 2007, and I am confident in saying that there's no sophomore slump here, because as far as I can tell, I thought Before They Are Hanged was a darn good book. How good? Well, you'll have to stay tuned to find out. However, before we delve into the book review proper, if you'll indulge me for a second and consider leaving a like on this video, commenting below to let me know what your guys' thoughts are on this book, and also subscribing to my channel. Not only does your engagement do wonders for my discoverability on this platform, but I really do enjoy reading your guys' thoughts on these books and seeing how we may agree or differ on certain aspects. I would really appreciate it, guys. Thank you so much. Secondly, if you're a new reader who hasn't read any of the books in the First Law series, then I kindly request that you read The Blade itself first, then check out my video review pertaining to that book. We're covering spoilers for that book here, and the last thing that I want is for anyone to get ruined on the events of The Blade itself by watching this video. If you have read that book but haven't read Before They Are Hanged, then no worries, because part 1 of this video will be spoiler-free. However, once you have read this book in its entirety, then I invite you to come back and watch this video because part 2 will be spoiler full. Timestamps are located below, so feel free to skip ahead of some of the spoiler stuff. With all that covered, let's go! So one of the things I neglected to mention in my review of The Blade itself was just how attention-grabbing these First Law book titles are. You see, rather than basing his book titles off of in-universe events within the story, Joe Abercrombie makes the interesting decision to derive his titles from real-life quotes or phrases. We should forgive our enemies, but not before they are hanged. It also sets the mood for the reader to prepare for a dark and violent read, which is a good idea because if you couldn't already guess based on the title, Before They Are Hanged is a pretty dark and violent book. Joe Abercrombie definitely revels in the grimdark genre here, so for some reason you read the first book in the series and didn't really like the gritty aspects of that novel, but are hoping that things get somewhat brighter in this second book, then you're going to be disappointed because this book is as grimdark, if not more so, than the first book. Now, speaking of the first book, although I did enjoy my time with The Blade itself, my biggest gripe with that story was definitely the rather disjointed plot presented within that narrative. I enjoyed the main characters quite a bit, and they undeniably carried this story, but The Blade itself felt more like the individual misadventures of each of our main characters, rather than an all-encompassing story that affects these characters. It functions as a rather scatterbrained form of setup where although we understand our characters' personalities, we don't really understand the overall scope of the story. It definitely felt like a character first and plot second kind of book. This book, however, I can satisfactorily say is a character first and plot first kind of book. Now that Joe Abercrombie has successfully set up his character chess pieces where he wants them, he's now more able to focus on the plot and allow it to share center stage with the characters. We finally have an understanding of the scope of the narrative, and I think it makes for an overall better read. Delving into some very light spoilers here, our story centers around 3 different groupings of characters, each with very clearly defined goals on what they need to do within the story. Group A, which consists of our main character sextet led by Baez, are off towards the edge of the world to obtain a magical artifact that may help them save the world. Group B, which consists of our infinitely interesting Glocta and his practical companions, are tasked to uncover a mystery surrounding the disappearance of the former superior of Dagoska. And Group C, which consists of our ragtag group of banished Northmen, are seeking retribution against Bethod after seeing the bloodshed that he has created in his war against the Union. The objectives for all these characters are crystal clear and are fueled by the central narrative, which is saving the Union. This more focused narrative is a marked improvement over the first book, where I couldn't really tell you what the plot of that book was. With the exception of a few scenes where we are aware of Bethod's ominous influence, the focus on The Blade itself seemed to be more on random events such as torturing tax cheats and investigating mercers rather than on war. It was a rather scattered plot to say the least. However, one of the things I did love about the blade itself, which I'm happy is still the case here in Before They Are Hanged, are the deep personalities for our main characters. Glokta, Jazal, and Logan all have layers to them which give credence to their motivations. And I always get a kick out of their individual characters' internal monologues and how much they differ from the external facade they put on for the masses. I am Corsten Dan Verms. The Lord Governor's son spoke his own name as though it was a magic spell, offered his hand to Glokta as though it was a priceless gift. He was blonde-haired and handsome, spread out carelessly in his chair, a well-tanned glow of health about him, as lithe and athletic as his father was ancient and wizened. I despise him already. I understand that you were once quite the swordsman. Verms looked Glokta up and down with a mocking smile. I have fenced myself, and there's really no one here to challenge me. Perhaps we might have a bout. I'd love to, you little bastard. If I still had my leg, I'd give you a bout of the shits before I was done. Even more appealing is the fact that all of our characters here deal in shades of gray. There's really no pure good guy or pure bad guy, which I think is for the best as it adds realism to our warlike fantasy. And no one shows this better than our dear friend Mr. Sandan Glokta. Honestly, I don't care a shit what you believe, and I care about doing the right thing even less. That's all a matter of who you ask. As for being a good man, and Glokta curled his lip, that ship sailed long ago, and I wasn't even there to wave it off. I'm interested in holding Dagoska. That and nothing else. Now don't get me wrong, I love the pure fantastical characters in Lord of the Rings as much as the next guy. But I think it's easier to invest oneself in a story where the fantasy characters reflect characters in our very own real world. That being that everyone, no matter who they are, has got some junk in their trunk. Now, although our main characters do the heavy lifting for the story here, as they should, our secondary characters are no slouches either. Baez, Dogman, and West all give gravitas to this story, and I feel this book would be drastically different without their presence. Dogman and West give importance to the seriousness of the situation in the North, and Baez continues to be one OP magi who even after 2 books, I think remains shrouded in a bit of mystery. That being said, not every single character is written with the same quality of care, and I still contend that after 2 books, Pharaoh continues to be the weakest link. Although Jo does give Pharaoh a few more layers here when compared to her character in the Blade itself, I still found her Pharaoh did not trust it, Pharaoh hated this personality to be rather one note. She's not exactly my cup of tea. However, what is my cup of tea are the transformations a few of our characters begin to undertake in this story. I'll get more specific about this in the spoilers section, but needless to say, I'm liking the non-static mentalities of these characters, and I'm looking forward to seeing how much they may or may not change in the next book. So I've just about said my piece when it comes to the non-spoiler aspects of this book, so I think now is as good a time as any to talk about some spoilers. If you haven't read Before They Are Hanged, feel free to click on the timestamps below to skip ahead of the conclusion of this video to hear my overall thoughts on this book. Additionally, you should also come back to this video once you've read Before They Are Hanged to hear my spoilery opinions on this book. However, if you have read this book and are keen to hear my thoughts, then keep watching. Now, besides noticing how expertly crafted Jo Abercrombie's character personalities are, which was already pretty apparent from the first book, my biggest takeaway from Before They Are Hanged was how skilled Jo is in writing character arcs that both feel natural and contribute to the story's more focused narrative. The primary example of this being our Group A of ragtag misfits where Jazal, Logan, and even Pharaoh seem to have developed and changed over the course of their adventure. Jazal in particular, who I always had a soft spot for despite his arrogant personality, seems like a completely changed man compared to who he was in the Blade itself. One too many near-death experiences, a broken jaw, and a scare with some Shanka have all caused our boy Wonder to not only question his original motives, but have also allowed him to cling to the people around him and see them not only as begrudging companions, but as friends as well. Jazal was already starting to grin. A month before, he could not have dreamed that he would ever be glad to see Logan again, let alone Pharaoh. But here he was, smiling from ear to ear, almost to see them still alive. Somehow, a bond was formed out here in the wilderness, facing death and adversity together. A bond that strengthened quickly, regardless of all the great differences between them. A bond that left his old friendships weak and pale and passionless by comparison. And although the group's journey to Shibuya turns out to be all for naught, and our group's developed friendship sort of goes on a temporary pause by the end of the story, we as a reader are aware that Giselle has improved for the better and will return to Ottawa a changed man. Change also being the case for Pharaoh, who despite going on a repetitive rampage regarding her desire for vengeance, ultimately finds her angry fire to be extinguished by the end of this book.
"Go wherever I can kill the Gurkish," she snapped it without thinking. "I will find other weapons and fight them wherever I can." She hardly even knew if it was true. It was hard to feel the hatred as she had done. It no longer seemed so important a matter if the Gurkish were left to their business, and she to hers, but her doubts and her disappointment only made her bark it more fiercely.
Our changes aren't just limited to Group A, however, as Group B also sees quite a bit of development in this book. We already saw seeds being planted for Glocta's returning humanity when he had that brief reunion with West at the end of the Blade itself. But to see confirmation on that burgeoning humanity in this book when Glocta disobeys direct orders to execute traitors and instead decides to release Carlot on Ida, makes for a good read. It also makes me curious to see what additional changes our favorite practical will undergo in the next book, because it definitely seems that Glocta is growing a little bit more of a conscience with each passing book. By the by, off topic, but I just want to note how coincidentally topical it was to read Glocta's interactions with a very sus-worthy bank given all the real-world news involving bank failures and mismanaged deposits. Joe has a very keen intuition for these things, it seems. Now, in addition to character transformations, we also have character revelations taking shape within this book. Caught somewhere in the Group C mix of Northmen is our dear friend Colonel West, and going back to my analogy about everybody having junk in their trunk, West is no different here because he looks like he's got quite a bit of junk that has yet to be revealed. Now, almost strangling his sister aside, which I'm not taking anything away from as that's a very horrible thing to do, up to this point, Colonel West could be seen as the moral center of the trilogy. He's your fantasy good guy trying to do right by his people and trying to keep his army alive in spite of the senseless meddling from his idiot leader in Crown Prince Ladislaw. But true to the grimdark genre, Joe refuses to let any one singular character be a true good guy or a true bad guy, and he allows West to fester in some serious shades of gray. In fact, I would say his shades of gray are pretty dark and becoming darker with each passing book. Now, West's murder of Crown Prince Ladislaw could be interpreted as a good thing, and in my opinion he did the Union a favor by ridding us of this complete buffoon. However, West saving Cathil from being sexually assaulted by Ladislaw soon recontextualized when we learned that West has some pretty gross White Knight milady expectations. West's intentions aren't as pure as initially assumed, and in true milady nice guy fashion, he believes he is owed a romantic relationship with young Cathil after saving her. Now, to his credit, West doesn't explicitly say this, but the way in which he stomps around with indignation when he discovers Cathil's entanglement with Dogman does confirm that West has got some serious growing up to do.
"The Dogman?" he muttered, face suddenly crunching up with incomprehension. "Him? I mean, why?" Why him instead of me was what he wanted to say, but he managed to stop himself. I know you must think." "You've no need to explain yourself to me," he hissed, though he knew he just asked her to. "Who cares what I think?" He spat it out with a deal more venom than he had intended, but his own loss of control only made him angrier, and he lost more. "I don't care what you choose to She winced and stared down at the ground beside his feet. I didn't mean to. Well, I owe you a lot. I know, it's just that you're too angry for me. That's all." West stared at her as she trudged off up the hill after the Northman, hardly able to believe his ears. She was happy to bet that stinking savage, but he was too angry? It was so unfair he almost choked on his rage.
Sadly, I don't think there's going to be a lot of growing up for West in the next book, because something tells me that, just like our other characters in this story, West will go through a transformative arc of his own. However, my prediction is that his arc will be an arc towards the dark side as he allows his anger to wholly consume him and turn him into a villain. We'll see if I'm right or wrong when it comes time to discuss Book 3, but the seeds are definitely here for a potential heel turn. They don't call Joe Abercrombie the King of Grimdark for nothing, so it'll be pretty on brand to see West, and by extension this trilogy, get pretty dark in the next book. So in summation, I thought Before They Are Hanged was a great read and improved upon some of the weaker aspects of the Blade itself. It immediately addressed my biggest complaint with the first book's story by not only providing a more focused narrative, but also giving our characters clear goalposts within the story. On top of that, the book's character development is top tier and keeps the story fresh, whilst leaving the door open for additional transformation arcs in the next book. But with all that said, thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen, for watching this video. As mentioned earlier, if you could like, comment, and subscribe, I would really appreciate it. My next video will be a review on Last Argument of Kings. It is the third and final book in Joe Abercrombie's First Law trilogy, and I'm curious to see if any of my predictions will come true in what's looking to be an exciting conclusion. Until then, thank you once again for watching, ladies and gentlemen, and I'll see you guys next time. The Advocate, out.